All right, everyone, it's Paula again, and I'm back with a module on roles and responsibilities, and this lesson is all about the 10 responsibilities of nonprofit boards. I'm going to carve these up into, I think, number 1 to 5 and then 6 through 10, so you'll actually have 2 lessons to be able to work your way through. So the 10 responsibilities of a nonprofit board, and again, we're making the assumption this is non-operational, this is actually a policy board. The first one is to determine the mission, the vision, the values, the core beliefs. Sometimes they're called the core values. Those are what we often call part of our foundational or framework kinds of policies. Now we have an entire new module on the whole area of how to create vision and mission. There is so much confusion of, oh, what is a mission? What is a vision? What's a core value? I'm going to clear that all up. And so again, if you're in the process of doing this, when you finish this lesson, bounce forward to the module that is about creating mission, vision, and core values, because you'll find that module really, really helpful. All right, the second thing is that we determine the governance role of the board. So what are your choices? Operational, policy, or policy governance / Carver board. And we want to make sure that we translate that into behaviors and actions. So we understand that the board exists to serve the organization, its clients and participants, and the employees who work there. So this is an important kind of concept, because it basically says, and I want to go to the dark side just for a second, is that sometimes we get very busy serving the board rather than serving the organization. So I want to reinforce that the organization exists to serve people, and the board exists to support the organization in those activities. And so, and by people I mean anyone. I mean even an SPCA, a humane society, serves people because they serve animal owners or prospective animal owners, not just our companion animals. So we are in the business of service, and the board is to be of service to the organization, and we need to make sure we double check the fact that we are not ending up often paid staff being of service to the board. And I'm not arguing that board volunteers should not be well treated, well fed, well communicated with. That's not the point. The point is, let's get our priorities straight here. So one of the roles of the board is to make sure that every single board member, every single committee is not a drawer down of organizational resources, but a builder up of organizational resources. So we should be asking our volunteers to be of service, and we should certainly treat them well, but we should make sure that we don't get a little tilty in how we are working with the board. We need to respect our boards, absolutely, but I've seen an awful lot of work going into the care and feeding of boards, and because they are an authority, the ultimate authority in the organization, we sometimes forget that it's the boards that's supposed to be serving the organization. Enough said. All right, third one is that we need to select, support, monitor, evaluate the executive director. Recruitment of executive directors right now, when this video is being filmed, is kind of challenging. And so we have a problem in terms of the number of baby boomers who are retiring. We have something like about 9 to 11% in the sector in both the United States and Canada who are retiring or leaving to go, if they're early for retirement in terms of their age, leaving to go to other work, consulting work, work in the corporate sector, work in other kinds of fields. And so this is a large number of people. We're estimating somewhere in North America around 100,000 exiting senior leaders in the sector per year. And so that's about somewhere around 9,000 in Canada and about 10 times that in the United States. So that's a pretty big number, and we do not have a sufficient number of people at the next level inside the organization to fill those roles. In fact, about 3 in 10 vacant positions are filled internally. So there's a shortage of what I call homemade leaders, and we need to do better succession planning and more leader development inside our sector in general. Some of your organizations have have nailed that. From my experience, I work with roughly 400 nonprofits from coast to coast. My experience has been we have awareness we need to, but we're not at the action stage yet. So we're not doing effective good leader development inside the sector or inside individual organizations. So the problem is when we talk about recruitment, it can be a really big challenge. And in addition to that, it's a big deal for board members to try to do it alone. So very often we hire executive search firms. Those firms tend to charge a fair amount of money. We're talking about anywhere from $25,000 to $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 to try and find your new executive director. And so we are often ill prepared for that process. So one of the things we need to take really seriously in our board roles is to say, are we ready? Do we have a plan for succession? Two types of succession plans. By the way, I've got my last book that I wrote is called Following the Leader. So check that out on learningforleaders.ca and you'll see it in our book list. And it's all about succession planning. And so we have the need to have an emergent or an urgent succession plan for someone. This is the executive director gets hit by the bus. Say it will never happen, but that's the urgent thing. Somebody gets ill, suddenly someone is called away on a family emergency, something happens that we don't anticipate. There needs to be a succession plan for that. And then we have the long-term succession plan that doesn't predict but prepares for the eventual departure of your executive director and the replacement of that person with a well-qualified person who's ready to serve in that role. The support part is clearly an ongoing relationship component of this. The evaluation of the executive director, there's a module in the Great Boards course where we do a deep dive on how to do that process. So the board has one employee and it needs to attend to that employee. So they're delegated by the board to do operational work, to have the operational responsibility, and we need to make sure that we're supporting and guiding and evaluating and monitoring and trusting but verifying that role. This is a role that we need to take more seriously from my experience than we do. We tend to say, we've got a great executive director, and the executive director will say, we've got an awesome board, and we kind of float along and happily go and etc. And we forget to do some of that preparatory work around succession. We forget that the executive director needs our support, and then sometimes we let the monitoring and evaluation component kind of slide. We don't do it as often as our policy requires, or we don't have really good processes in writing to be able to make that happen. All right, number 4 for this lesson is that we develop and work to achieve at least a 3-year plan. Some boards manage to do a 5-year plan. My personal advice to you is 3 years is long enough. We are always on a changing landscape here. Funders change, economic environment that our organizations work in and change. Our services and programs change. A 3-year strategic plan is pretty much as far out as we should be doing kind of our long-term visioning and creating of goals. And we need to ensure also that we have the senior staff of the organization doing operational planning. That operational planning needs to be congruent with, it needs to match the goals that are strategic. And I want to just remind you that the board is responsible for strategic initiatives, not just paid staff. Executive directors and senior managers will support the board ensuring those strategic goals are accomplished. But if your organization, here's a little thing that you might want to measure, if your organization has a strategic plan, the question is who is doing the work to achieve it? And the answer is, if the answer is it's mainly staff, then one of two things. First of all, the board is responsible for strategic initiatives and the board is defaulting to staff, which says you might have a disengaged, weak, or not ready board. The other thing that can be happening is your plan is actually not strategic, your plan is actually operational. So actually look at your individual goals and say, are these arms around goals? Are these big picture? Are these 10,000 feet? Are these umbrella kinds of goals? Because if they are, they're strategic. And if it's mainly staff working on them, sometimes it's because the goals aren't strategic or are mostly not strategic, they're actually operational. So managers just grab onto them and make things happen. So really important that we actually look at strategic planning. And again, we have a module entirely devoted to strategic planning. So if you're at that stage in your organization's development, jump forward to that module. But what we're really doing here is we're saying it has to be truly strategic, and the board has to be engaged, and it should not be a staff-driven only kind of activity. Staff should support the process that's engaged in by the board, by the committees the board creates to make the strategic plan goals a reality over the 3-year time frame. By the way, it's really common to meet once a year to update your goals, so don't leave it through, create your plan and then 3 years later is the next time that we meet. Create your plan, and in the end of the first year, meet, update, end of the second year, meet, update, end of 3 years, do a new 3-year plan. So that's a very normal kind of process to go through. So, fifth and last thing on this particular lesson, we've got 5 more on the next lesson, is that we need to ensure that we have ongoing, objective, usually external program evaluation of the quality of the supports that we provide, of the things that we do for the people we serve, whoever it is. You could be a professional association, you could be a human services, social services organization, any of those things. We are in the business of doing something for whoever our constituents or consumers or users are. And we need to evaluate on an ongoing basis using some objective measures and some rigorous metrics. Metrics meaning the data that we collect, that we are looking at that with a critical eye on a regular basis. Now, the board doesn't do this. If the board was an operational board, absolutely it would do the evaluation. But the board requires, and it's a governance policy, how often we'll do it, how rigorous it is, who is responsible for doing it, and also will approve in the operating budget once every 2 or 3 years that we will ensure that these things are being taken care of. What we're really saying is that we exist to meet some constituent or community need. And the question that we're asking in an evaluation of the quality and of the outcomes of that is, are we accomplishing that objective? Are we accomplishing the purpose of the organization? And of course, we're not being naive here. We're making sure that we're on the path to progressing and the path to accomplishing. We'll never probably ever completely get there. So we just need to make sure that we are evaluating whether or not we are on the path to make that happen. All right, that brings us to the end of this lesson. There's no your turn learning assignment at this point in time. You're going to go right on to the next lesson if you have time, and we're going to pick up where we left off with number 6.